I really think it's important for us to try to meet the victim in their home if they have any kind of impairment, whether it's cognitive or physical. It just tends to be a situation where they're more at home, they're more comfortable, and also they see that we're willing to go to them. And this is not some cold institution that they're dealing with. These are real people who are actually trying to help them. So I actually go out as often as I can to meet a victim in their home for the first time. And also when we have a defense interview, we often will do it in their home, as much as we can in their home to keep them as comfortable as possible through this very difficult proceeding.
If it's a case outside a facility, I totally agree with Paige that the home is the best place to conduct that interview. And by going to the home, you learn so much. You look at the photos surrounding the victim, and by looking at photos, you can engage them in conversations about things in the past without suddenly introducing this case that you have to talk about, which can be embarrassing or maybe bring up some emotion. So I think you can build a rapport just based upon learning something more about that victim by looking at their surroundings.
And I would just echo what both Paige and Paul have said about visiting the victim first in the home. If there's an opportunity to do that and to take a victim advocate, it's a wonderful way of introducing yourself, building trust with that victim about what your interests are in the case, and that you really want to hear what they can tell you. And oftentimes in our elder cases, those victims can testify and do testify in trial. And so building that rapport with the victim early and with the victim advocate.
I have some thoughts about how prosecutors can work with older adults and be attentive to confidentiality as well. Well, first of all, the most important thing is that prosecutors are clear with older adults who are complaining witnesses that they don't actually have privilege or confidentiality with the prosecutor. And I know some people get nervous about telling people that because they say, but then that means they won't share information with me. And I honestly think that if people unwittingly share information with a prosecutor and then it has some consequence that they don't like, the outcome will be that they pull out of the case altogether, and then they don't want to testify or they recant, and you have all those negative experiences that you don't want to have. So being clear with people up front and honest with them as a prosecutor about what your role is, what your relationship is in the system to the older adult who's experienced abuse is extraordinarily important to building trust and building a relationship. And that includes being very clear and honest about what is the role of a victim witness assistant who works for a prosecutor's office. So we can't assume that the regular person who is an older adult and has been victimized understands that when they meet with a nonprofit advocate, there's confidentiality and privilege, but when they meet with a victim witness assistant who works for the prosecutor, then there is no privilege, there is no confidentiality. That information actually gets shared with the prosecutor or could be forced to be shared with a criminal defendant. Being very clear and upfront about that in the beginning is important, and also protecting victims' ability to have private privileged conversations. If they need to have privileged conversations with an advocate that the prosecutor or the victim witness assistant doesn't sit in on, let them have that. Because I am fully convinced that when we respect people's privacy, we respect their choice, then they feel stronger. And when they feel stronger, then they are more prepared to participate in accountability measures and such as trials and prosecutions. It's when people feel uninformed or scared that they withdraw and then they don't participate.
When a prosecutor is interviewing an older person, I think the first thing is to remember that, you know, in old age there's tremendous variability. It's not a homogeneous group, and so you really want to see this person as an individual and really understand this particular person. You want to understand, you know, what are their particular, you know, if they have any health concerns, if they have any special needs that you need to, make sure that you accommodate, whether is there, a hearing impairment? Maybe not, but maybe there is. You want to make sure that, that you remove distractions, that you are interviewing somebody one-on-one, that you really want to give them that privacy. You don't want to have other family members there unless that person says that they want a family member there. But at some point in the interview, it's really important to also interview the person alone. That's going to require oftentimes building rapport with somebody. Sometimes it's good to start off by just asking somebody about, just to talk about themselves, rather than starting off just by going right into, diving into the deep end of the pool, talking about, sexual abuse or physical abuse. I mean, I think that if you just can create, a space for them where they feel that there's, privacy and respect, I think that that goes a long way. Having patience, letting people tell their story, if it comes out slowly, we're such a fast-paced society, and sometimes people need time to process questions and to give their answers. We need to respect that. I think that if we can ask, simple questions, sometimes we ask in one question multiple questions. So I think if we can give people a chance just to slowly tell their story, care about not only the story, but the person telling the story.
When you're working with an older adult, you need to be aware of the fact that you have to pace your interview with their ability to understand. So, is there a language issue? Does the person speak English? Is English the primary language? Are you using a qualified translator or interpreter as opposed to a family member who may be the alleged abuser? So that it's very important to involve, to make sure that the person understands the language, so that communication is there. There may be visual or hearing impairments that might impact on communication. Pacing the interview to meet the needs of the older adult is also very important. Lawyers tend to speak very quickly, and so the older adult may not be able to follow the questioning or the conversation. When there are questions, when there are inquiries, try to do it in a way that's non-judgmental. Not asking why this is happening, because then there's a tendency for the victim to blame themselves, to feel guilty, and so if there's a sense of judgment taking place, they might shut down. It's important to start where the client is. And you need to put the pencil and the paper away. You need to connect with that individual as a person and provide that individual with the respect. Some people, I have this issue with doctors and healthcare providers. Are you talking to the computer while you're dealing with the patient, or are you dealing with, is it person-centered care? The same thing I would have with counsel. Are you focusing on writing and getting everything down, or are you really connecting with that individual? And that makes a big difference when you're interviewing an older adult.
What advice would you give to prosecutors working in a very language-diverse community?
Use a language bank. Have qualified interpreters and translators. Don't rely on lay people. Don't call in the housekeeper that's in the hallway that happens to speak the language and have them come in. Try not to use neighbors. Definitely do not use children as translators. That's a sign of disrespect. The resources may be hard to get, but we have telephone language banks. You can call in. We need qualified translators when we're working with that.